They picked the wrong carrier. On a gray Tuesday morning in May of 2025, the USS Carl Vinson cut through the northern Red Sea at a steady 18 knots. Routine freedom of navigation patrol, part of a carrier strike group that had been holding station off the Yemeni coast for 11 days. The flight deck was active, but not frantic. 2 FA-18s on combat air patrol overhead, a Hawkeye circling at altitude, eyes wide open. Below decks, the morning watch was changing. Coffee was hot, radios were calm. Then 06:11 local time hit like a wall. Radar screens across the strike group lit simultaneously. Combat Information Center on the Vinson called it in before the bridge watch even finished turning their heads. Multiple inbound contacts, fast movers, low altitude, bearing 270. This is not a drill. The words every carrier crew trains for and hopes never to hear. Within 40 seconds, every combat station on every ship in the strike group was manned. Within 90 seconds, the Vinson's Aegis-equipped escorts were already tracking, sorting, and preparing to engage. Within 2 minutes, the first interceptor missiles were on their way. The Houthis had just made the most expensive mistake of their campaign, and they had no idea yet. This wasn't random. It wasn't a lone drone crew acting on bad coordinates or a rogue unit firing in frustration. Intelligence analysts aboard the Vinson had been tracking elevated activity along the Hodeidah coastline for 6 hours before the launch. Radar emissions, vehicle movements, unusual radio traffic patterns on frequencies associated with Houthi launch coordination. The picture was building, but the attack came slightly ahead of the window the analysts had flagged as highest risk. Slightly ahead, that was the margin. At 06:09 local time, sensors on an escorting destroyer detected the first launch signature. Ground flash, exhaust plume, then a second, a third. Within 90 seconds, the full scope of the attack was visible on the strike group's integrated radar picture. 11 projectiles total, 4 cruise missiles flying low and fast, skimming the wave tops at under 50 feet to stay beneath conventional radar coverage. 3 medium-range ballistic missiles climbing steeply before arcing toward the carrier group in terminal descent. 2 loitering munitions drones, Iranian pattern Shahed 136 variants, flying slow and low on pre-programmed attack profiles. And 2 more contacts that the CIC initially classified as possible decoys, small radar reflectors designed to split the defense net's attention and waste interceptors. This was a saturation package, designed by people who understood, at least on paper, how layered naval air defense works. The idea was simple: fire enough different threats from enough different vectors at the same time and hope the math overwhelms the defense. The Houthis had studied the playbook. They just hadn't studied what happens when the defense net has already seen your playbook. Because that strike group didn't just have missiles and guns. It had 11 days of accumulated intelligence on every radar site, every launch position, and every communications relay along the western Yemen coast. And when those 11 contacts appeared on the integrated radar picture at 06:09, the Vinson strike group didn't see a surprise. They saw a confirmation. Everything they had been tracking for 6 hours had just gone active, and the response was already loaded. Here is what the Houthis were up against. The USS Carl Vinson herself carries the Phalanx Closian weapon system, 2 of them. Each one a 20mm M61 Vulcan Gatling cannon capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute. Not per hour, per minute. The sensors on a Phalanx mount can track an incoming target the size of a baseball at 2 miles. When it fires, it creates a physical wall of tungsten rounds so dense that a cruise missile flying into that cone simply disintegrates. No guidance system survives contact with 75 rounds per second of tungsten traveling at 3,400 feet per second. That is the last line.
Before anything reaches the Phalanx, it has to survive 3 other layers. Layer 1, the SM-2 Standard Missile, fired from the Mk-41 vertical launch system cells on the escorting destroyers and cruiser. The SM-2 is a medium to long-range interceptor. It flies at Mach 3.5. It uses semi-active radar homing guidance updated continuously from the ship's SPY-1 radar array. Against the ballistic missile threats in the Houthi package, SM-2 Block 3B variants handled the high-altitude intercepts. 3 missiles, 3 ballistic threats. The math was clean. Layer 2, the ESSM, Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile, Shorter range, faster response, built specifically for low-flying cruise missile threats that try to use wave-top flight profiles to avoid the SM-2 engagement envelope. The ESSM fires in pairs. It uses active radar terminal homing. Its reaction time from threat detection to launch is measured in seconds, not minutes. Against the 4 cruise missiles in the Houthi package flying at under 50 feet, the ESSM was the primary response layer. Layer 3, the FA-18 Super Hornets already airborne, armed with AIM-120 AMRAAM radar-guided missiles and AIM-9X sidewinders for close-range engagements. The 2 Hornets on combat air patrol at the time of the attack were vectored immediately toward the drone contacts. Because drones are slow enough that a missile solution from a fighter aircraft is clean, fast, and final. And Layer 4, the Phalanx, for anything that somehow made it through the first 3. 11 contacts went inbound. The defense net processed them in order of threat priority, engagement timeline, and available interceptors, simultaneously, not sequentially. Simultaneously because the Aegis combat system doesn't think about one threat at a time. It manages the entire engagement picture in real time, deconflicting interceptors, managing radar bandwidth, and making engagement decisions faster than any human operator could. The Houthis fired 11 projectiles. What they didn't fire was enough. 0614 local time, 3 minutes after first detection. The first SM-2 intercept happened at 28,000 feet. A Houthi ballistic missile in its terminal descent phase met an SM-2 Block 3B head-on. The detonation was visible from the Vinson's flight deck, a white flash at altitude, debris falling in a long arc toward the sea. 12 seconds later, a second ballistic missile was intercepted at 19,000 feet. Same result. The third ballistic contact had a steeper descent angle, faster terminal velocity. The first SM-2 fired at it detonated close, but not close enough. The engagement computer on the escorting cruiser, USS Lake Champlain, assessed the miss within milliseconds and fired a second interceptor. The second missile found the target at 8,000 feet, less than 4 seconds from impact with the ocean surface. That was close. That was the margin working exactly as designed. Below the radar horizon, the 4 low-flying cruise missiles were threading through wave troughs, using terrain-following profiles to stay beneath the SM-2 engagement floor. The ESSM batteries on 2 of the escorting destroyers had been tracking them since the moment they appeared. Engagement solutions were already computed. The ESSM pairs launched in rapid sequence. First cruise missile intercepted at 4.2 nautical miles from the nearest ship. Second at 3.8. Third at 2.1. The fourth made it to 1.4 nautical miles before an ESSM caught it 60 feet above the wave surface. The proximity detonation sent shrapnel across a 40-meter radius of open ocean. Nobody was in that 40-meter radius. The defense geometry had already accounted for that. In the air above the strike group, one of the FA-18 pilots got a radar lock on the first Shahed pattern drone at 14 miles. AIM-120 off the rail. 8 seconds later, the drone was a falling fireball. His wingman took the second drone at 9 miles with the same result. Clean shots, clean kills. The 2 decoy contacts were tracked, identified as non-threatening, and allowed to fall into the sea without expending interceptors on them. That decision was made by the Aegis system in real time and confirmed by the tactical action officer in under 4 seconds. From first detection to final intercept, 6 minutes and 14 seconds. 11 contacts inbound, 0 reaching the Vinson or any ship in the strike group. Not one scratch of paint. On the Vinson's flight deck immediately after the final intercept, the sound was different. Not celebration, not relief, something more controlled than both. Sailors at their stations, officers checking status boards, the rhythm of a crew that had just done exactly what they trained to do and knew there was still work left. Spent ESSM launcher cells being logged, SM-2 reload status being called in, phalanx mounts staying hot, because everybody on that flight deck understood something the Houthis apparently did not. Surviving an attack is the first half. Inside the CIC, the tactical action officer was already compiling the engagement log. Every launch signature, every radar track, every intercept coordinate. But more importantly, something else. The launch sites themselves. Because those 11 projectiles had all originated from fixed or semi-fixed positions that the strike group's radar, the Havoc Eye overhead, and the P-8 Poseidon surveillance aircraft orbiting 50 miles north had collectively mapped in real time during the engagement. The Houthis had just handed the Vinson strike group a complete picture of their active launch network. Every position that had fired was now a confirmed target coordinate. In the CIC, someone said it quietly, "We have everything we need." That wasn't a relief. That was a starting pistol. 0641 local time, 30 minutes after the last Houthi projectile was destroyed. Strike Package Kilo was authorized. The Vinson's hangar bay shifted gears in a way that anyone who has watched a carrier at war would recognize immediately. The organized chaos of a flight deck preparing for a combat strike looks different from routine flight operations. The movement is faster, the communication is tighter. The weight of what is being loaded under the wings of the waiting jets is visible in how the ordnance crews handle it. GBU-38 JDAMs, 500-pound GPS-guided bombs, precision within meters. GBU-31 JDAMs, 2,000-pound variants for hardened targets. AGM-88 HARM missiles on the EA-18G Growlers, anti-radiation missiles designed to home in on radar emissions and destroy the source. The Growlers went first. Their job was to suppress any remaining Houthi radar systems along the coast before the strike aircraft entered the threat envelope. AGM-88s don't care about jamming or countermeasures. They follow the radar emission itself. Turn the radar on and the missile comes to you. Turn it off and you go blind. There is no good option when a harm is in the air. At 0648, the first pair of EA-18G Growlers launched off the catapult. Electronic warfare pods active, jamming suites running. They crossed the Yemeni coastline at 25,000 feet and immediately began suppressing the 3 Houthi radar frequencies that had been active during the attack. 2 of the radar sites went dark within 90 seconds. Their operators had seen what HARM missiles do to a radar installation and made the rational decision. The 3rd site stayed active, either bravado or a malfunction. Either way, a harm found it at 0652. The radar site stopped transmitting permanently. At 0654, 12 FA-18F Super Hornets launched in pairs, each aircraft loaded with 4 JDAMs and full defensive systems. Their targets were the confirmed launch positions, 6 sites in total, the same 6 positions the Vinson's strike group had been tracking for the previous 6 hours and had now confirmed through real-time launch signature correlation. No guessing, no probability estimates. Confirmed positions, confirmed targets, weapons free. The first pair of Hornets rolled in on a mobile Houthi launcher positioned on a ridge 4 kilometers north of Hudaida. 2 GBU-31s, direct hits. The launcher and the vehicle that had transported it ceased to exist in the same second. The second pair targeted a cruise missile storage facility that intelligence had flagged 3 days earlier and confirmed during the attack window. GBU-38s, precision placement. The secondary explosions that followed lasted 40 seconds and were visible on satellite imagery taken 17 minutes later. Meanwhile, from 60 miles east, the USS Michael Murphy, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, opened 4 VLS cells. 4 Tomahawk cruise missiles climbed to altitude and then descended toward western Yemen. Their targets were not the launch sites themselves, but what was behind them, a Houthi command and control facility built into a reinforced structure south of Hudaida. The kind of target that requires something heavier than a JDAM, the kind of target where you want the warhead inside the building before it detonates. All 4 Tomahawks hit within a 90-second window. Seismic monitoring equipment on a nearby ship registered the impacts at a distance of 55 miles. The command facility went silent. Total strike time from first Growler launch to final Tomahawk impact, 22 minutes. No U.S. aircraft lost, no U.S. personnel casualties. All primary targets confirmed destroyed by post-strike imagery within the hour. By 0900 local time, the Red Sea was quiet again. But quiet is not the same as resolved. Within the first hour after the strike, Houthi communications showed a pattern that U.S. signals intelligence had not seen in weeks. Frantic, fragmented, units calling in to report positions that no longer existed, command staff requesting status updates from relay nodes that had been destroyed. The communication architecture that coordinated the morning's attack had been systematically dismantled in the 22 minutes following it. Iranian state media, which typically amplifies any Houthi claim of success against American assets, published nothing about the morning's events for 11 hours. When coverage finally appeared, it described the American strikes as attacks on civilian infrastructure without mentioning the 11 projectiles that had preceded them. That silence was its own answer. Aboard the Vinson, flight operations resumed at full tempo by 09:15. Combat air patrols were doubled. The E-2D Hawkeyes were now running continuous orbits rather than rotating coverage. Every radar emission along the Yemeni coast was being tracked, logged, and assessed in real time. The rules of engagement had been updated. If a radar signature matches a fire control pattern, it is now a valid target without waiting for a confirmed launch. That is not a small change. That is a fundamental shift in how the strike group operates in this environment. The Houthis had spent months probing, launching, retreating, probing again, testing what the US would and would not respond to, building a picture of American restraint and using that picture to plan the next operation. That picture no longer exists. Because what the Vinson strike group demonstrated on this Tuesday morning was not just a defensive capability, it was a complete offensive response cycle. Detect, intercept, locate, strike, and do all four inside 90 minutes while continuing normal flight operations. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, repositioning from the eastern Mediterranean, was confirmed to be transiting toward the Red Sea within 24 hours of the attack. 2 carriers, multiple destroyers, a cruiser, submarines running quietly below the surface that no one discusses publicly. The Houthis wanted to make a statement. What they made instead was a targeting solution, and shipping lanes that had been nervously quiet went back to normal traffic patterns within 48 hours, because the message had been received not just by the Houthis, but every captain, every cargo operator, every insurance underwriter watching that stretch of water. The Red Sea has a guardian. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't send warnings, it intercepts, it strikes, it reloads. And the morning of May 2025 proved something that no press release from the Pentagon needed to confirm. You can fire 11 missiles at a Nimitz-class carrier strike group, but you better not miss. So here is the question. Should the US now move beyond reactive strikes and begin a systematic campaign to dismantle the entire Houthi launch infrastructure? Or does targeted retaliation remain the smarter long-term play? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this kept you locked in from the first sentence to the last, hit like. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns where the real story is in the tactics, the technology, and the decisions made in the seconds that matter most. And share this with someone who thinks aircraft carriers are just big targets, because the USS Carl Vinson just gave 11 very fast, very expensive reasons why they are anything but. Stay sharp, stay safe. If you're going to shoot at the most defended ship on the planet, you better not miss.